Welcome to Stolen, the world's greatest eminent domain podcast. Legally, the government has the power to take your property, but most people don't know what to do when it actually happens. If you don't respond correctly, you could walk away with far less than you're owed. And when that happens, in effect, the government steals your property. Our mission is simple: protect property owners, make sure they get the compensation they deserve. The government will steal your property, but only if you let them. Hey, I'm Chad Brown. I am your host for Stolen, the world's greatest eminent domain podcast. I'm once again here with my sidekick, Caleb Wheeler.
Hey, sir.
Caleb, we're the Batman and Robin of eminent domain.
That's right. Who's Batman, who's Robin? We'll never know.
Yeah. You look at the building and see whose name.
Yeah, you got that.
All right, very good. Fair enough.
Elite Enterprises.
So, all right. Hey, we are here back with another episode of Eminent Domain Podcast, where we look at all the issues affecting property owners and how in eminent domain, condemnation action, inverse condemnation action. If you don't know what that is, it's not where the government gives you your property back. Go watch the last episode. And we're helping people work through the issues so that when they're facing an eminent domain action, they don't feel like the government stole their property when they get done. You know, and it's not just about feeling. I mean, the law requires people to get just compensation, but I know there really is an emotional component to eminent domain. People are very, especially in the South, people are, I guess the North too. I guess people are
Americans.
Yeah. Americans. America.
Yeah.
So they are they're tied to their land. They're proud of their land. They value their land, and when it's taken, or part of it's taken, and it really is. If it's against their will, it's not like it's a voluntary taking, and these are all involuntary takings. Then you know they get their feelings hurt a little bit, and I don't blame them.
No.
And so one of the things that's imperative to solving that emotional sort of dilemma is actually getting just compensation.
Right.
It's really getting the proper amount for the property that you lose.
Right.
And directly into our topic today, which is valuation. Now, valuation is, oh man, it's like 7 episodes. I mean, you could look at each of the valuation methods. You could look at the different ways it's calculated. We're not going to do that today.
Right. But
I think it's important for people to understand that there is no just compensation without proper valuation.
Yeah.
So it's like no compensation without
no taxation without representation.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so there's no just compensation without proper valuation. So we're going to use days. We're going to go through valuation issues. Really high level. Let's just introduce people to valuation and what they should be looking for, and how they can sort of start to prepare when they're dealing with an eminent domain or condemnation action. So let's just start with what actually, we already did this in one episode, but just briefly, what's just compensation and what are we trying to do when we're helping people in these cases with respect to getting their paid?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like J.G. Wentworth commercial. It's your money. You know, you need it now. It's my money. I need it now. Sure. So this is actually kind of applies here because valuation is it's your property and it's worth a certain amount of money at that moment in time. So that moment in time is the day that the date of take, which is when they file a lawsuit against you. So just compensation is simply this: it's fair market value as of the date of take. Okay,
of what they're taking.
Right. Actually, it's the technical way to look at it, Chad, is this. This is helpful for the audience, I believe. It's what your properties, the difference between what your property is worth before the taking and after the taking.
Yeah. So
that difference is what
if it's what we call full taking, a fee simple taking,
right,
then you're looking at what was your property worth yesterday.
Yeah.
And you get 100% of it because they took it all.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
If they're taking a partial taking, it's looking at, okay, they took one, 12% of my property in fee simple, and they took an easement for a permanent utility easement, and they got a temporary construction easement, and they took a slope easement or whatever it is. And so what was it worth the day they took that, and what's it worth now that I've lost
right,
either actual physical property or I've lost use of the property in some capacity, or I'm restricted in some capacity in what I can do.
That's right. It's the fair market value as of that date. So fair market value, more often than not, dipping into my real estate experience when I was a broker, we look at comparative market analysis, which is basically looking at comparable sales to what you're actually losing.
Right.
And with that being said, of course, we'll get into that later at a high level, but yeah, just fair market value, which not terribly difficult to figure out what that is.
So let's just go through a little bit of vocabulary. Once again, I think one of the biggest issues for people in these cases is they just don't quite understand the vocabulary to have the proper conversation. So it's important for us, when we're working with clients, a lot of times what we're doing is actually trying to give them the understanding of the vocabulary so that then we can have a good conversation about what's going on. So let's just what's a full versus partial taking? What's that? What's that mean?
And I have clients come to me all the time, say they're taking my property. They don't understand the scope of it, what's going on. So simply this, a partial taking is when the government's really only taken a portion of your property.
Right.
More often than not, it's the road frontage to your property.
It's in these residential cases for sure.
Especially with the residential cases, it's mostly the road frontage.
Right.
Where they're going to widen the road and extend the power lines inside of your property.
Right.
Just to get them off the road. Yeah. So there's that. There's also full takings. So a full taking is two ways. Either they're actually physically going to take all of your property because they need to,
right,
or they're taking so much of your property that there's no more economically feasible use for that property. Therefore, it has to be a full taking.
Yeah.
So those are two ways you have a full taking.
So they take it all, or they take so much of it, or they're impacting in such a way that it really has no value.
It has no value to it.
Okay. So fee simple versus easement. Because those are the components we see a lot.
Right. So fee simple is a person who takes a fee simple interest in a property. That's the person that owns the property.
Right.
You're the owner.
Right.
Fee simple equals the full ownership. Easement is your right, as a right reserved by somebody, the easement holder, to use somebody else's property for a specific purpose, but they don't own the property. It's just for that purpose.
So in a fee simple, so in a full taking it would be a full fee simple, like in a full taking where they actually take all of the property to fee simple. In a partial taking, they might take a fee simple interest, which means they might actually confiscate from you, steal, if you will. They take, 150 foot long by 15 wide section.
That's right.
And then they actually might take an interest in your property through an easement as well.
That's right.
Okay. So they're going to take something. They're taking something. That's why we're here. Mm-hmm. So where do you start in the valuation process for figuring out what is the value of what was taken? Like, what's the starting point in the eminent domain process? Where do you start?
Yeah, absolutely. So first off, just like you said, they're going to take something.
Right.
And you have to come at it with that attitude. Right. They're going to take something. It's like the IRS. The IRS is going to get theirs. So, why would they not do that in this instance, right? So you have to figure out, how do we start out with this process to get what we're actually owed? And so with that being said, where we start with the process, where I usually start, is the highest and best use. Now, usually it's a simple issue because a residential home is a residential home. And if it's zoned for residential and only residential, guess what? Its highest and best use is for a home.
Okay. So highest and best use, for people who may not know, is one of the central sort of tenets of understanding valuation in eminent domain cases. So at a simple explanation, if you can, what is highest and best use?
Yeah. So highest and best use is the lens that we're looking at the property with. Okay. So, the lens, what I mean by that is what's the lens that we're going to view the property with when we're making the determination of what it's worth. Okay. So to figure out the highest and best use of a property, there's a couple tests you have to run through it. And first and foremost, you have to run through, is it legally permissible? So if a property is, let's just say it looks like right now, okay, we put on our regular people.
All right, just solid. Okay, you're way over people's head. Can you just give an example? Like, sure, give someone, give like a real example of like how highest and best use works.
All right, so a field. We have a big field, and the field looks like a pasture. Okay. But this field actually happens to be in a multifamily zoning.
Yeah. It's mixed use or something.
Mixed use, whatever, you name it. Zonings are
Multifamily. Let's just go with multifamily.
So it's actually
So you got this big city developed, and you got
this pasture right there.
you got this pasture right there in the middle of the city.
Sure, we'll do that. And so we have this pasture, and this person's running cows on it right now. But the state comes along and says, we want to take this property from you for
City Convention Center to parking deck.
exactly. Let's say that. And so they come along, they do that.
7 acres.
7 acres, which, okay, great. But we're not going to look at it and value it like it's a pasture, which the government will do.
Yeah.
They're going to do that every time. Okay. I'm sorry to say it, but they're going to do it. I'm not sorry to say it, but they're going to do it.
Okay.
So with that being said, we look legally permissibility. So what's the legal permissibility for this property? This is where you got to get creative. You got to have some vision. So you have to look at the property and say, oh,
through the lens.
Ha-ha. You have to look at it through the lens and say, okay, this is zoned this way. What would be the highest and best use for this property? What would be a legally permissible thing we could do with this property that would make it worth a lot of money? So you could sell it as a future development site.
Right.
Okay. Legally permissible because it's zoned mixed use. We know that. Is it physically possible? We're going to assume this is a flat piece of property with no drainage problems.
Okay.
So yes, this is physically possible. So legal permissibility, physical possibility. And then we also have to look at through, is it going to be maximally profitable? So what's the most profitable use for this property at that time?
Okay, so let's just back up. So we got Farmer Brown, and he's got his cows on his 7 acres in the middle of town.
Yep.
Government comes in and says, hey, I know that you've been rejecting offers from development for 37 years, and there's a whole city built up around you, and you've stood your ground, and you should be proud of yourself, but we're taking it.
This is the classic highest and best use. Oh, and one other prong was financial feasibility.
Okay.
So it's going to actually make them money.
Okay, so the DOT or the town, let's just say it's a county taking or city taking, like a municipal government taking. And so they're going to come in and they're going to offer, and they're going to say, well, it's pasture land, and pasture land is $3 an acre. And so we're willing to give you $21.
Sure.
And Farmer Brown is not happy, right? Because Farmer Brown had an offer from a developer 3 months ago for $21 million because the land is primo land. It happens to be near the river because that's where he waters his cows. So in the highest and best use, what you're doing is looking at it and saying, okay, we're taking your property, but we're going to value it based on the lens of what would the highest and best use in terms of value would be for the property. So in this case, if the highest and best use, let's just presume it is, there might be 14 different uses. And this is where creativity gets its little aside. This is where creativity comes in because there's a lot of potential uses for the property. So they're going to come in and we're going to say the highest and best use was residential development, and that would be 21 million. You would come back and say, well, I know you think it's worth $21, but highest and best use is this level of development. We brought our appraiser in, we brought our team of development experts in, and then we've looked at it, and that's what the standard we think should be used.
That's right.
Okay, so let's just roll with this example because I think highest and best use has multiple applications, but certainly when you have this mixed usage, you see it a lot. So let's go to the next step, though. So Farmer Brown has his appraisal, and he comes in and says, okay, this is what we say. So now the municipal government comes back and says, no. You used a sales comparison approach. We think you should use an income capitalization approach because the residential housing market is down, and we think your property is only worth $10 million. So once we get to highest and best use, then we actually have to look at the reality that there's different ways to value that highest and best use, right?
Right.
So let's hit the primary. There's 3 primary evaluation methods. I'm going to tell you what they are. You tell the people how they work and what they are briefly. First would be cost approach. What's that?
Okay, so great. So this will be simple, quick, and So first off, they meet the highest and best use requirements. So the four requirements, and once they get that hammered down, cost approach is simply this. Based on that, what is the cost to replace what's being taken?
Right.
What is the cost to replace what's being taken? That's a high level look at it. Is so basically calculating the cost to replace it. And there's other things in cost approach like devaluation based on time it's been existent. So like basically, something getting run down because it's been around forever.
Okay.
Yeah, that's going to be a part of that as well in those calculations. Because remember, they're not valuing to replace it; they're valuing to see what they're actually taking.
Okay,
they're not yeah. So that's one of the cost approach you have to remember.
So candidly, that's probably for Farmer Brown. That's probably not. I mean, we need it field, but it's probably not the best use.
At best has a barn on it. Probably not going to be the best way to value this.
So even the DOT recognized that it would be absurd to think that we were probably going to use the cost approach here.
Right.
Okay. So let's go to the next one, which is sales comparison approach.
Popular method of valuation for any type of real estate appraisal, whether it be for a mortgage or for eminent domain. Tax purposes, whatever. Sales comparison is a very popular approach because you're taking other properties that are similar to this property, and you from that extrapolating from their sales prices, which should be close to the date and time of taking, and you're extrapolating from that what the value of this property should be.
So you see these very much in residential takings because the sales comparison approach. I mean, these things are so technical. I don't want to oversimplify it, but the sales comparison approach works well when there's a lot of trading of similar that type of property. So you got a huge market, you got a lot of properties being sold and bought, and that gives you a pretty good idea comparing sales. And so if we sold this is what it would be.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. And then finally we have income capitalization. What is that?
The income capitalization is essentially you're taking the profit, the net profit that the property creates, and through that capitalizing on that to figure out what the property would be worth. And there's some technical math that goes into that. We won't waste our time here with that, but there's some math that goes into that to figure out what the property would be worth because you're getting a return on investment from this property.
Yeah. So in our Farmer Brown example, cost approach probably not good. Sales comparison could work.
Absolutely.
If you had a sort of an active market for large, like in our example, it's probably, I don't know, I give you almost no facts, but in our example, you've got sort of an isolated piece of property in a developed area. But if you were in a developing area where there was a lot of real estate being sold, so let's say it's the city's outgrown its bounds and it's growing out in the country. And now they're buying up all of this property to convert it to commercial or whatever it may be, or mixed use, whatever. So that might make sense there where you have a lot of other property that's being bought for other uses.
Right. So I think in this example that we have here, because presumably Farmer Brown's not really making any money off the property.
Right.
Unless he's selling hay off of it or whatever.
Yeah.
But that's not going to be a whole lot. So presumably, you don't know. But it presumably sales comparison approach will probably be the most valuable method of valuation in this example. However, I will say this, the DOT per the rules, they're supposed to use every valuation.
So like North Carolina did.
That's what we know about. So that's South Carolina. They're supposed to use every form of valuation, or at least discuss each one in their appraisals, which we know they don't, but typically. But typically they're supposed to go through every one of these valuation methods, and every appraisal we've ordered that we've ever used in these cases, our appraisers do that. They go through each of these methods.
And it gets back to sort of this central tenet that we started with, that the government's taking your property. They're supposed to pay you fairly for it.
Yeah.
It's well established that they're supposed to pay you the highest and best use of it, not just how it's currently being used. And with that being said, there are multiple ways to value property.
Yeah.
And because there's multiple valuation methods, for you to be treated fairly and get just compensation, we need to take the time to explore the different ways that your property can be valued so that we do actually come up with the best value for you.
Yeah, exactly. And even with these partial takings and residentials, where you have like a fence being affected or a brush or a shrubbery, a tree or whatever, there's cost approaches even in that, and alongside the sales comparison approach, because what we're doing is we're getting contractor quotes or we're getting quotes from these provide like arborists or whatever, and we're able to take these things and extrapolate a cost approach to get people compensated for what is actually being taken.
Right.
So it's not always going to be exclusive. There's going to be, you can take each of these valuation methods at times in conjunction with each other.
Right.
Yeah.
The key is just establishing what is the best use of the property, what's being taken, and which valuation method we use is going to give our client, or if you're representing yourself, is going to give you a fair compensation. What is just compensation? And I think one of the things, though, that people need to understand is, once again, we're very deep, very quickly in complex terminology and complex concepts, and it's not a fair field because the people who work for the DOT and the people who work for these utility companies, I mean, they're using appraisers who are familiar with all of these approaches. They're working right-of-way agents and attorneys who are familiar with the ways that these can be used to both increase value but also decrease value. And I think this is one of the areas where you realize the average person is going to be in way over their head very quickly. And when you get in and over your head quickly in an eminent domain case and you're arguing about valuation, usually you're going to lose.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to be doing this right here, scratching your head, because these cases can get, it's not hard to imagine a scenario where this can turn into complex civil litigation very quickly, because you have somebody who's on a corner of a subdivision. There's an HOA involved with that as well. The HOA has a sign in the middle of the median or on that person's property, and now they're taking that corner lot in the subdivision. And so all of a sudden, now you've got the HOA named as a defendant, and then you're named as a defendant in the same lawsuit.
Right.
And guess what? Now you're in complex civil litigation.
Yeah, I mean, and the other thing is just understanding that the valuation methods that are going to be used are going to almost necessitate that you're using an appraiser. I mean, it's this very technical skill, and even qualified appraisers in this space, I mean, often have 5 to 10 years of experience, and even they are easy to sort of make a mistake or overlook a valuation method that we should consider. And we see that in the appraisals we receive. And anyway, it's too complex for this one day, but I think it's important that people understand valuation methods. If you're in an eminent domain case, condemnation action, you need to appreciate that the only route to just compensation will be through proper valuation. So without proper valuation, there's no just compensation. And I think that's probably the big takeaway. You agree?
I absolutely agree. I think without a good handle on, I'm not saying the owner has to have a good handle on it.
No.
But without having an expert who has a good handle on it, who can opine as to what their property's worth. Yeah. I mean, you're going to be a sitting duck.
Yeah, very much. Maybe on a drainage easement pond.
Sitting there.
Get your broke good. All right, that's it. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Subscribe. We'll be back. I don't fire Caleb soon to talk about more eminent domain issues. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.